Hey everyone, I hope that you're doing well on this chilly, windy day. I just wanted to check in as we move from Unit 4 to Unit 5. So, Unit 4, of course, we were talking about secondary sources. At this point, I believe that I've given everyone credit as appropriate for your work on Hypothesis and Twitter. If I've missed anyone, please reach out and let me know so that I can make sure to give you credit for your work. Also, I'm going to be responding a little bit more. I haven't had a chance to actually do that yet, so to kind of comment back in Hypothesis and on Twitter and so on. So do be looking for that. As we turn to look at primary sources, then, we're going to be spending 3 weeks on primary source analysis. And we're going to be thinking specifically about how and why primary sources as a type require different analysis, a different approach than a secondary source. So we know that historians or other researchers have created secondary sources based on their readings of primary source materials as well as other secondary source materials to try to tell us something new about the particular history that they've studied. Right? So they're filling a gap in the historiography, or at least giving us a new perspective or something like that. Primary sources, on the other hand, these are the raw materials of historical research. This is what we look at to find historical evidence. And as we've talked about a bit all semester, historical evidence is imperfect. It's based on the observations of human beings through their own lenses, their own beliefs, their own worldviews. And so they are limited in terms of what they give us. Also, in terms of what remains, we are limited. The historical record itself. So when historians talk about, quote unquote, the historical record, they're talking about all of the records that still exist in the archives, in digitized newspaper archives, in physical archives that you could visit at university or in Santa Fe or in Washington, D.C. or Mexico City, depending on what you're researching, artifacts, on and on and on. These are all things that could form part of the historical record, people's memories as well. And you'll notice, again, everything I've just mentioned is imperfect, and that record is incomplete. No matter whether we, how much we wish that we had a complete telling of the past, if we were just to find it, the reality is that the records to find all the answers to all the questions and all the perspectives just don't exist. And so we need to think then about primary source research from kind of that angle. What do we do about that? This idea that we're working with an imperfect record. How do we decide which sources are best? How do we decide how to read them critically? Who do we decide is lying and why? I mean, if we make that decision, oftentimes we don't. But again, you might be like, oh wow, everyone else from all of these other records that I've read says this thing. This person is lying, or at least they are an outlier in terms of their perspective, the conclusions they've drawn about this event. Again, so I'm just giving general kinds of examples here, but these are the types of things we'll want to be thinking about. So as you do week 1, we'll be thinking in these kind of broad terms about, again, thinking what are primary sources, how should we read them? And it's not just critically, of course critically, but what does that actually mean? How do we read them critically, and how do we understand them? Next week, on Monday, October 18th, we will have a special visitor, Dr. Kathleen Cahill. She used to teach at UNM. She now teaches at Penn State. She does history of the American West, of women, and of suffrage, and most recently. And she's done some research in the Deming Archive, so that's something relative to research that I've done. The folder of documents that we're going to be reading about the 24th Infantry during week 2 of Unit 5 is something that she's looked at, and that she's found actually more information about. And so she'll be able to give us some fuller context and ideas around that, but also she's just going to talk to us about the experience of doing research and how she as a historian thinks about the issues that I've just kind of laid out. So if at all possible, and I know that you won't all be able to be available on Monday afternoon at 2:00, but if you can be by any stretch, please do come, because she's taking time out of her busy schedule for us. And it's a wonderful favor that she's doing for us, and so I want to make sure that she has a good audience. The Zoom link, I'll share it here in this announcement, but it's also available in Brightspace in the unit learning module. So that place where you click on Unit 5 and it takes you then to the unit narrative on Medium. The Zoom link is there. I didn't put it out on Medium just because Medium's public, and so I didn't want the Zoom link just out where anyone in the world could find it, since it's specific to us. All right, so please do let me know if you have questions. Oh, and I should point out, so I told you about the 2 weeks, the first 2 weeks of Unit 5. The last week, you'll read each other's kind of ideas and reactions to that set of documents on the 24th Infantry. The second week, you will have written, what did you make of those documents? What did you learn about the 24th from that set of papers? Then you'll read others so that you can think about how and why we've all interpreted them in different ways and what that means about historical study. So that's where we're headed over the next several weeks, 3 weeks. As always, let me know if you have questions, if I can help with anything, and I will talk to you soon.